Hello, you're watching Who Are Wareham here at WCTV with me, your host, Queen Banda. Today with me in the studio is the state representative, Miss Susan Williams-Gifford, and also Tom Fitzpatrick from Turning Point. We're here to discuss about the affordable housing and how that relates to Wareham efforts towards putting people in homes, basically just taking people out of the streets and providing them the homes that they desperately need. So, for the start, let's get to know my guest very well. So, Miss Susan Williams-Gifford, would you please tell us a little bit about your work and how it relates to our efforts here at home?
Well, thank you for having me, Queen. First of all, it's an honor to be here. This is a very important subject, and I know that hopefully we'll discuss some very important topics. But briefly, I'm state representative for Wareham, Carver, and precincts 3 and 6 of the town of Middleborough. I was first elected in 2003, and I'm currently the Assistant Minority Whip, which means I'm a part of the House Republican leadership team, and I also serve on the House Committee on Steering Policy and Scheduling, which helps guide pieces of legislation through the process and try and get as many things done as possible with the blessing of the Speaker of the House, of course. So since I've been elected, one of the main concerns that has been brought to me, not just in the town of Wareham, but also in Carver and to some extent Middleborough, and that is the issue of affordable housing and the definition of what is affordable in regard to Chapter 40B, which is the affordable housing piece of our Mass General Law. And most people know that we have a large number of mobile and manufactured homes in the town of Wareham. In fact, at one point in time, I believe the number was 1,071. I think it's a little bit lower than that, but it is still over 1,000. The town of Carver has almost 1,200 mobile homes, and people have argued for years that these are affordable housing units, and they should be counted as such. So for years, I have been filing legislation to try to change the definition of affordable under Chapter 40B so that we can count mobile and manufactured homes, or at least a portion of them, toward our affordable housing stock. And what that would do then, in my humble opinion, is to prevent the town from having to deal with 40B developments, which again, in my humble opinion, I don't feel that 40B developments are providing enough or the appropriate kind of affordable housing that we really need here in town. And if we can get the 40B developers to back off, because we're prime targets. We have infrastructure, we have buildable land, and that's what the 40B developers need. So if we can kind of put a hold on that, then I think that we can really turn our attention to the right types of housing that we need in our town of Wareham.
Very good. Thank you so much. Tom, would you please talk to us a little bit about the work that you're doing at Turning Point and how that relates into the struggle of pretty much providing homes for people who are in need?
I will. Queen, thank you for both having me here and for your interest in this subject. It's very rewarding to see the community at large engaged in this conversation. My work at Turning Point kind of began as I was ending my career as a defense executive. And in that period, I had the opportunity to be involved in the construction of new housing in southern New Hampshire for veterans. And that gave me some idea of the organizations that have resources to bring to bear on this issue. That connected me with Father Bill's in Mainspring, and I've sort of been a bridge between Turning Point and Father Bill's in Mainspring and the state resources that are available to deal with the issues that our clients need to have addressed.
And so both from Father Bill, Romaine Street, Turning Point, and even your office, you're both talking about putting people first. May I ask what that means to you, putting people first?
Well, the people that I represent elected me to be their voice on Beacon Hill, at which I'm proud to say I have a record of service to my constituents that I'm very, very proud of. We can't fix everything, but most of the time, if I can't help, I can find someone who might be able to help. So it's all about listening to what the needs of the community is and working toward finding solutions to these, I don't really want to say problems, we like to call them opportunities in planning, but that's the most important thing, and that's what I feel is the most important part of my job, is listening to the people I represent and trying to find solutions to those issues.
Yes. And through listening to the people that we represent in our community, what could you tell us about the people that you're serving in this community?
Well, those people have very varied or very different needs. In a given month, we probably, last month, we had 50 people that came to Turning Point for assistance. If you consider their families, we provided assistance to 115 people through those 50. The assistance takes all forms, again, depending on specific needs. But our dominant forms are utility assistance, rental assistance, assistance moving from homelessness to housing. We run an emergency food pantry, and so 90% of what we do are in those categories. The remaining 10% are specific to individual needs, could be things like prescriptions or any of those types of things. In general, our goal is to understand what it will take to make each of our clients be in either less pain or be more successful, and find a way to address those needs.
Very good. Okay, let's move back to the affordable housing. Would you please explain to us, how do affordable housing rates determined by the state?
Well, a lot starts with the Federal Census Bureau. They come up with, they ask questions about how many people in your household, how many people work, and the type of work that you do, and basically what your income is. And so that data then is compiled, and depending on where you look, there's information in regard to the state of Massachusetts keeps a list of what the categories are, and they are extremely low income, very low income, and low income, and those are basically the people who need our help the most. And I know that we'll talk a little bit more in detail about it, but just to give you some idea, these are the numbers that I just got off the website this morning, and based on New Bedford, which I think is probably a fairly good representation of what we are here in Wareham, and extremely low income for a family of four, $24,300. Now think about that. How can four people live on $24,000 a year?
That's way above extremely low income. That number should not even, that's poverty.
Yeah, and I think Tom has a number that's even a little bit more stark than that, and maybe you can explain where the data that you been working off of comes from too.
So we use the same guidelines, and about 95 to 98% of the people we see in a given month are in that extremely low category. And so a family of 2 or 3 people has an income of less than $24,000 a year. The remarkable thing to me is that the majority of our clients have incomes at half that. It's unusual for us to see clients that have incomes of like more than $1,000 a month. And you can imagine how difficult it is to live on that kind of an income. That is what the people we serve, that's what their income levels are like.
Yeah.
And let's also keep in mind too that that's not necessarily for everyone who's working. There are people who, for whatever reason, don't have a job, can't work, and they rely on Social Security, disability, or other types of assistance programs. And again, if you can, through all of the resources that are available to you, if you're in that unfortunate situation where you need assistance, you are lucky if you can generate an income of $1,000 a month.
Right.
So it's basically, if you want to call it, the working poor and people with disabilities and other issues that prevent them from holding a job.
Yes. And one of the questions that I've been hearing from many people in our community is that we here in Wareham are surrounded by towns that we do not compare with in terms of economic status, right? We have San Marion, Rochester, and these are very worthy towns. And we do have worthy people here in Wareham, but it's not well distributed. You have the haves and the have-nots. And so when it comes to affordable housing, how we are counted, depending on where we are in our county, we get the shortest end of the stick. So for that, what would it take for us to be counted towards the rates that are most suitable for us? And is that possible?
I don't know if that's possible. It gets to a point where you want to stay away from generalizations, but sometimes you have to. And I mean, I know the diversity that is Wareham. And like you said, we have $1 million homes on the water, and we have $55,000 cottages in some of our beach areas that really aren't even suitable for year-round habitation, but because that's all that there is. So I don't know if there's a way to fine-tune how Wareham is represented in the overall picture of affordable housing. But if anyone has any ideas on how to go about doing that, I'm all ears.
My sense is that counting differently won't change the situation on the ground. The situation on the ground is that it is very difficult to, even when equipped with a housing voucher, it is very difficult to find an apartment that you can move an individual into in town. Currently, there is like a 1% vacancy rate for one-bedroom apartments and studios in town. And so no matter how you count it, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's something it's something that we struggle with. So I looked at the Wareham Housing Production Plan report, the one that recently came out, was in January 2013. And it said that out of the 10% that is required from the state government, we have reached 7.7% of the affordable housing. And this seems to be a struggle. And even the report stated that that 7.7% counts for 757 affordable units. And that these units are extremely insufficient to meet the needs of Wareham residents. So my question is, how do we fix that? How do we get to the 10%? And can we get to the 10%?
Well, the easy answer to that question, and it's actually not that easy, but my legislation to count mobile and manufactured homes towards the affordable housing quota of 10% would put Wareham over that 10%. In fact, counting 50%, just a flat 50% of those mobile manufactured housing units would put Wareham at 11%, believe it or not. Again, emphasizing how many of these mobile manufactured homes that we have. Now, granted, as Tom and I discussed, that's not going to just putting Wareham over the 10% by utilizing some of our really affordable homes, which I don't think too many people would argue that a mobile home that you could buy for $30,000, in some cases even less, is not affordable housing. But again, there are people who can't afford to do that and have to have help. But my opinion is if we can get over this threshold and not have to concern ourselves so much with Chapter 40B projects, which in my opinion don't provide the kind of housing that we need or for the cost that most of the people in the community need. So if we can get past that, my hope is that we will eventually be able to move toward providing the right kind of housing that we need in Wareham for extremely low income individuals, the disabled, the elderly, seniors, and that's what we need to do, because a housing project that comes in with let's say 50 units and only 10 of those units are designated as affordable under the 40B law, we're never going to get to where we need to be. And again, I would argue that those affordable units are really not affordable for the people who really need the housing.
Yes.
Just as one point in support of the argument that mobile homes are in fact affordable housing, is that a great many of our clients are from mobile homes. There's no doubt that that's the same housing stock.
Absolutely. So it seems like it's a great thing to turn or to count mobile homes as affordable housing. And in Wareham, we have so many of them. We have a little bit over 1,000 mobile homes. So why has the battle been such a long struggle and very unsuccessful?
Well, when Chapter 40B came into being, I think it's now 40 years ago, it was a very noble purpose, and that was to increase the amount of affordable housing in our big cities like Boston, Worcester, Springfield, Lowell, Lawrence. And it was a good program because, as you know, everybody knows, people can barely afford to live in those cities unless you have a six-figure salary. So that was all well and good. But I think what's happened now is that, again, the 40B developers, and I hate to keep beating them over the head, but they're looking for communities that have buildable land and infrastructure, and that's where they come in. They put up their housing project, they designate a small percentage of those housing units as affordable, and then they walk off with their sizable profit and leave the communities with the burden of new people coming in, putting more people in our schools, causing drains on our infrastructure and public safety. So what's happening, though, is that some of the powerful lobbying groups who work for like CHAPA, they see any changes to Chapter 40B as weakening the law. And even though what we want to do here would not affect any of those, affordable housing issues in the big cities, they still see it as weakening the law. And I just don't think that, that the pressure that they've been putting on people to, on Beacon Hill basically to, we don't want to make any changes in Chapter 40B. Let's
the law
leave it-
is
leave it
towards
go.
protecting people and helping the people, right? The law is for all of us. And so if there is a demand of change, it's not towards just weakening the law, it's the community telling you, this is what we need. You gave us this, but this is what we need. Communities, like any, I hate to sound corny here, but people are different. So communities are different. So for people to tell you that this is what we need in our community, it's not we are trying to be difficult, but really this is what we need. What would you say about that, Tom?
No, I think it makes perfect sense that the law should reflect the needs of the population, and if it's out of date with respect to the needs of the population, it needs to change. And the population has real unserved needs, probably nationwide, but certainly here in our area for sure.
One thing that I say all the time about Chapter 40B is it puts every city and town in the Commonwealth in a one-size-fits-all law. And Tom absolutely hit on that, in that you have to look at the needs of the individual communities. You can't paint us all with the broad brush.
Definitely. So there is a need to get to that 10%. We need to get to that 10%, right? Because
Yes.
if we are below that 10%, we cannot control who comes into our town, right? So with that, I know that Turning Point is in Father Bill in corroboration. They are looking towards purchasing a certain land, which is going to fall under community preservation, I believe, right, Tom?
That's true. It turns out that it's a project that is part affordable housing and part preservation. And it's an interesting coincidence, I think, that this 10-acre parcel has on it 8 acres that the Preservation Wareham Land Trust believes is perfectly suited for them. Then it has a 2-acre apartment building, which is not well suited to them, but it's well suited to us. So we put together a proposal jointly. That proposal is in the order of $700,000 with offsetting grants, which brings it to $635,000. About 1/3 of that amount is for the preservation land, and 2/3 is to buy the apartment building and to make improvements to that building, such as a new roof and new furnaces. And that apartment building will be deeded in perpetuity to affordable housing.
Yeah.
It's an apartment building suitable for 6 people, and it's, doesn't make a big difference in the 10% numbers that you're talking about, but it will make a big difference in our ability to house the most vulnerable people in our community.
Yes. And those, you said 6 people, 7 people? Yes. Are they families or just individuals?
It turns out that there are 2 2-bedroom apartments and 2 1-bedroom apartments. So it could be small families, or it could be 6 individuals.
Absolutely. And how are you going to pick who comes to live there?
So it turns out that there's a statewide process for that, and that statewide process sort of scores the vulnerability of the homeless population, and the most vulnerable in that population are the most urgent folks in need of housing. And that process has been in use now that I'm aware of for 2015 and 2016. 9 people from our homeless community, Wareham's homeless community, have qualified for that assistance.
Yes. And do we know how long the people chosen will be able to stay in the house?
My experience with that is it lasts until their circumstances profoundly change, and they rarely profoundly change. And what I mean by that is that people will become housed, people will gain employment, but they won't gain enough employment to sort of move into the six-figure category that you were mentioning earlier. In other words, it doesn't. They're likely to be there for some time.
Yes. So what do you have to say about this?
Well, the other thing I wanted to point out too, and getting back to the question as to how do we address the issues, how do we address the need? Well, I just realized too that Governor Baker back in August announced that there were affordable housing development awards. And this is significant because this is not 40B projects. These are grants that are going to cities and towns that have a plan to increase affordable housing units. This particular round of awards from August will create or preserve 1,420 housing units across the Commonwealth. Now, again, that said, the awards went to communities. Most of them are, the bigger cities, but I mean, there was an awardee in Belchertown. There was also in Great Barrington. These are not huge, urban communities, but they were ready with a plan. And part of what the goal was is that these projects serve a wide variety of constituents, including individuals and families transitioning out of homelessness, persons with disability, the elderly, which are all our high need population. So.
So as long as if we get a plan, if we work something a plan, we will be able to qualify for something like this?
Yes, to answer your question, and again, relieving the burdens of 40B developers and being able to focus on the appropriate type of housing, we could then go to the administration and say, would you please consider some of these smaller scale projects in some of our more rural towns? And hopefully, again, you have to have an idea, you have to have a plan, and I think if we can focus on moving in that direction, I think that there will be some state assistance available.
Absolutely. And in this report on homelessness in Wareham, in which you worked very well together with Turning Point, it talks about housing first, something about housing first, and basically to provide housing to those who need, and then you're going to focus on the rest later.
Yes.
What do you have to comment about this?
Well, that's absolutely true. And another part of this whole picture is job creation and workforce development. Again, not every person who is in need of housing right now is going to be able to get a job and keep a job. But that's part of the whole picture of economic development. And when you can use, there's MassWorks programs, provides public infrastructure funding for city and town center revitalizations, mill redevelopment, multifamily or small lot, single family residential development, and transportation. And all of these things come together, and like you said, housing first, then we have to focus on, you know, if there's education and training needed, you know, we have to make things available, every possible resource for those who want to utilize those resources.
Yes. And Tom, how much progress have this program been able to make since it started?
Before I answer that, I did want to point out that the Housing First strategy is a national strategy that's been around since the first Bush administration. So it's a well-proven strategy. It's a well-funded strategy to the degree that anything's well-funded. It turns out that if you implement a Housing First strategy, there are funds that support it. If you implement a different strategy, there are no funds that support it. So I think we've properly applied the right strategy. With respect to progress, 2015 was a terrific year. In 2015, by putting together multiple sources of funding, Turning Point was able to transition 21 people from homelessness to housing. In addition to that, through this state voucher program, we were able to qualify another 9 people, and ultimately, between our own resources and the state vouchers, we moved 28 people from housing to homelessness last year. That was remarkable, and Representative Gifford had a role in that because 15,000 of our funds came from funding that she obtained for us. In addition to transitioning nearly 30 people from homelessness to housing, we stabilized 35 additional people in their existing homes. And so we prevented homelessness for 35 and healed it for 30. It was a great year.
That is remarkable. It really is. There are larger cities and towns that can't boast of that those kind of successes.
And it's good to see success, I would imagine, something like this, because yes, it seems like a big problem, but in order to see, and as you well explained it to us, the amount of success that this program has able to make. Yes, it does not contribute too largely into the 3 or 2.3% that we still need, but it's still, to those who need it, it's a lot. And it's all about really changing the lives of people.
They are the most vulnerable people in our community, and it's a profound difference to them.
Absolutely.
And it's good for the community at large. The other point of progress made last year is we've done a really good job at what we call intervention, which simply means interacting with the homeless population, and we've done that sort of by personal engagement, but also by bringing sort of the community together so that we can share information and be certain that we know as many people in that population as possible. Because in the end, what you need to be able to do is to know the individual, know that individual's needs, match it to resources from either private or public, and solve the problem one person at a time.
Yes, very good. Now, to kind of bring everything together from our talk today, what would you suggest that we as a community should be working towards in order to help provide housing towards those in need?
Well,
what should be our next step?
First of all, I do want to encourage everybody to come to town meeting on, I believe it's October 25th,
yes,
Monday, the last Monday in October, so that we can try to approve the request, the article that will get the funding, the CPA funding, or CPC funding
yeah.
for the project in West Wareham. I think that's a very critical first step in moving forward. But I also believe that, once again, we have to start looking at the type of housing that we really need and focus on a plan. And once we have that mindset going forward, I think we can really make some strides to try to seriously address the need for affordable housing in the town of Wareham.
Yes, thank you so much, Tom. What would you, do you have anything to add to that?
I support that broader view. I think it makes perfect sense to focus our affordable housing initiatives and resources on the specific needs of this community, and I think they are the chronically homeless, which would be first in my priority list, but certainly the elderly as well, and the disabled. And there's probably an additional priority around single parents.
Yes.
But I endorse the broader view, and I endorse the focused strategy on the particular needs of our community.
Okay. Thank you both so much for joining me here at WCTV today. I learned a lot, and I hope this information is going to really benefit the community and give them hope rather than seeing that it's a big mess. Because really not. With you by our side, it's really not a big mess. Oh. You have worked so hard towards helping towards really creating a change. And even though it's in a little stages, it's still change. We're still moving towards the direction we want to be in.
Well, thank you for having me again. It's been my pleasure, and any information that we can get out to people, anybody can get involved. Take an interest in the people that you live with in your community, and the more help, the better.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Thank you,
much.
Queen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching Who Are Wareham here at WCTV with me, your host, Queen Banda. As you see today with me, it was State Representative Ms. Susan Williams-Grifford and also Tom Fitzpatrick from the Turning Point. So with that, I want to say have a wonderful day. Bye.